unless you've been living under a rock over the last few months, you would have been aware of the Johnny Depp Amber Heard defamation case and the ongoing fallout and basically media frenzy over it. Well, just before coming in to record the Inform today, there's been a result. And we couldn't have a more appropriate team enshrined to discuss this. So join us today. We've got John Heron, victims advocate and solicitor. We've got Mario Beeks, author of Blood and Soil, former Croatian military officer and security consultant. And we've also got Caroline Council, one of Australia's leading family law practitioners. Good morning, team.
Good morning.
Morning.
Now, we've just had the outcome this morning at the early hour. I think it was about 5 a.m. I noticed it come to. Are we going to see ongoing ramifications, or is this just going to be not much is going to change? Will it be impactful going forward for the broader domestic violence narrative? Where are we?
Well, Michael, I might kick off. I had reason to speak to one of the major news programs in relation to a county court matter, so closer to home, where a very similar set of circumstances with less money obviously being claimed and counterclaimed was involved. And the question was asked, is there going to be more of this? Are we going to see more of this? And I think as a society becomes more litigious, and in some ways we've lagged behind the USA in that regard. The USA has a penchant for being known to be very litigious, whereas, you know, we've sort of been the baby lagging behind in that litigation sense. But my concern is that if people don't feel that they're able to be heard or supported or have their relationship end in a respectful way, they will find other ways to attack each other. It's human nature. And that's disappointing because, as I said in that instance, and I say it now, there are better ways to manage these disputes.
Yeah, I must say something, if I can just add. Thank you, Caroline. It was quite entertaining to watch this court trial. Actually, it's as much as entertaining and funny for all of us viewers. I couldn't believe how much that indecent behavior is actually being shown by both sides and depicting everything what was happening at the relationship. I'm pretty sure, as you said, it should be kept something for themselves. And you know, but public, he wants to know what's happening in the court. You know, that's a hunger for the more. That's what I saw.
Yeah, let's just look at the result itself, because you had a unanimous jury verdict in this case. So the full range of costs were awarded for defamation to Johnny Depp, and there was a little curveball in there with $2 million awarded to Amber Heard about Johnny Depp's lawyer defaming her in a public comment. So that was a $2 million blow. So all in all, it was about 8.35 million US awarded to Depp. So I'm just saying that was the unanimous jury verdict. As Mario said, there's a lot of speculation in the US on court TV, watched around the world. We're here talking about it now. The second page of that back in Australia is what groups want to make something out of that finding. You know, as Caroline said, the ability to speak freely. Being in court every week and involved in family law and the associated intervention orders or AVOs in that aspect, there is absolutely mayhem going on with one person, regardless of gender, laying into the other person left, right and centre. Now that's partners. Look, I've had a case recently with a 14-year-old taking one out on the 12-year-old sibling. It goes to nth degree. You've had the police involved in many of these things. I'm at the stage now when I receive an intervention order within these family law environments, the actual detail, what's read out against from the applicant to the respondent, I almost completely ignore that because it's 80% usually not factual. There's that aspect. There's the other aspect too, I'll finish up on this, is that is this process genuinely protecting people who really do need protection? Mostly women.
That's a good question, yeah.
Now, Amber Heard saying she's lost the right, or feels that women have lost the right to speak up and tell their story. She had the right to tell a story in court. Am I right in understanding that this is because of the op-ed that she did, not because of the claim she made in court, but because of the editorial that she penned, that the defamation rises?
It was definitely the opinion piece that she wrote without naming Depp, but he was impugned. So that's as good as, naming him. Yeah, it could have only been one person in certain respects of that piece that she was talking about. So that's what gave rise to the defamation. But I think John's point is really interesting. We now operate in a world where people think that it's okay just to let loose. Social media platforms give people the perfect opportunity. We've seen it play out in relation to bullying amongst very young people who are adept users of social media. So it's a case of, it's almost like the vacuum of that which we write doesn't hurt anyone. There's almost a belief that if you put it out there, it doesn't really have ramifications. So for us lawyers, for John and me, for example, we know only too full well that there are very serious ramifications. And the couple that went through the county court system here in Victoria, they didn't find that experience. I don't think either of them would have found that experience very pleasant at all. Luckily, they were able to mediate their matter to a conclusion. But what a terrible platform on which to resolve your matters. That's my point. There are much better ways if you support the people. There's a lot being said about Amber Heard's mental health, and there was evidence given about Amber's mental health. People are very fragile when they go into these situations, into these relationships. And at the point at which the relationships fall apart, that fragility in many cases can be fatal. So, these are people's lives that are on show here. And I take up Mario's point. It's become like fodder for the mob. It's not very nice. I didn't go down the rabbit hole. I've done reading, but I haven't watched. It's really interesting to see who amongst my immediate friendship group has gone down the Depp Amber Heard rabbit hole. Completely absorbed, absolutely fascinated.
If I can add something on this, I don't know law. I'm not a legal in any type of law type of practitioner. My job is investigations, but I can say something from personal perspective, and as well watching this trial. And as we all can appreciate that, we can agree that every relationship starts with attraction, and then comes seduction, and after all comes destruction. And that destruction is what entertains the people. That part, nobody cares about how somebody met somebody, loves somebody, but that part, because misery loves company. And in terms of the Johnny Depp and Amber, it is what I saw, and I was continuously watching past 5 weeks overseas. It was everywhere, on every channel, on every social media platform, everywhere. And all that destruction amongst each other was being entertained material for everybody. And I'm afraid that this is going to escalate even more. I think this is just becomes like a benchmark for the future cases as well, to be televised and be, I can't, if I can say that for, it's going to be prostitute, in the public domain, everything was happening. And I agree with Caroline, what she said, there must be the different ways that all of this being kept more discreet and more far away from the eyes of the public. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, indeed. But again, like we did touch on in Australia, how we see this manifest itself in family law and family violence cases. But let's go back to the origins of the case. And it is a pure defamation case. It wasn't a family law case. Johnny Depp had already lost a case, I believe, in the UK against one of the tabloids. So that wasn't necessarily verified. But at the end of the day, defamation being that it affected both of their incomes. So that was proven, and the jury took up that and found a unanimous verdict.
Yes.
in any particular tort case, just for the viewers. So there actually has to be damages suffered by the parties. There's often confusion around defamation, that someone said a few derogatory words and where does that go or end up? So this was a genuine open case of loss of income, possibly on both parties, but certainly the jury found that Johnny Depp lost income in that. But again, in Mario's, that's just the case in the courtroom. 99% of the theatrics were clickbait with media
That's
to
correct, yes.
on-sell that. Really, at the end of the day, we're part of that too.
Yes.
Talking about it now. So the shenanigans and it just got more and more to the point of the bedroom and disposal of bodily waste and all types of things like that was the thing that was clicking. So media outlets analyze this very carefully. So they were just trying to get any angle on that and then inserting opinion into what was said in testimony, etc. And if you're ever in the US and you watch court TV, you'll see that they have analysts coming on, legal, they have batteries of lawyers commenting what the verdict may be, etc. No different here.
Yeah.
But John, may I ask you something? Do you believe that this commentary, people who comes in shows, TV shows, you said, they're doing the verdict, ahead of the verdict. Does this influencing overall the verdict in the court?
No, the jury's
Okay.
isolated from that.
Okay.
Are we catastrophizing this? I've seen some advocates for domestic violence saying that this is going to do great harm, that women aren't going to believe. As Caroline mentioned, some people are that far down this rabbit hole, those ferrets are never coming back. But is this just a one-off case of a couple of dysfunctional people in a relationship that were struggling for whatever reasons, and it's not going to have any long-lasting impact? Of the people who still say that women aren't believed are still going to have that position, and people who say that men aren't believed, are they still going to have that position? Surely this isn't going to be a precedent-setting case where they can refer back to and go, oh, but, remember when? Will this have any long-lasting impact, John and Caroline, going forward in your daily practice?
Michael, as John pointed out, this was a defamation case. For you to mount a defamation case, you have to have a truckload of money, because the lawyers aren't going to stump up to court unless they're paid. So most of the work that we see from the family violence perspective is either in the magistrates court in relation to intervention orders, appeals in the county court, and in the family court, so the Federal Circuit and Family Court of Australia. The reach for the defamation element is really at the very dysfunctional end of separating couples. The lethal situations will often raise their heads initially in the magistrates court or the family court, followed by lethality. Whereas this is really the grab for money, but it's also the grab to have the final word, the final say. There has to be a level of dysfunctionality, as I said, subsequent to the separation, that has not been satisfied in any other forum, including the courts, including counselling, including mediation. But what we have to be very careful about is not advocating to people to choose this as an option. Who would actively choose to have their lives so exposed? And when you do suffer from any form of fragility, there is nowhere to hide. Once you're in that witness box, you are completely exposed, and you cannot control the line of questioning that's put to you. And I'd be interested to hear from John. I don't think we're going to see this as any form of precedent. What I am worried about is the sort of behaviours that lead to people choosing this as a method of dispute resolution. That's what worries me.
Yeah, Carolyn, you triggered my memory. About 4 or 5 years ago, there was a case in the family court where the ex-husband brought an action against the wife and I believe it was a personal action against a raft of allegations, including child abuse, that were levelled against the male and were proven in the family court to be not true. On my memory then drops away to think whether that case was successful or not. I think it may have been. It was a very rare one-off situation. So that comes out into the realm of what's said in court. Is that, you know, the truth? And we've all seen in the family court, like, and in intervention orders, as I said earlier, it's just out of control, the amount of truths, untruths, and you can't really tell reading it whether fact occurred or not. But these documents are lodged in court, and are they tested? Rarely. But certainly back to the original point, Michael, about that a lot of my friends involved in domestic violence advocacy have taken this decision, and even over the last few weeks, very seriously. They talk about that you've got, if you challenge a powerful man with money, that this is the outcome that you'll get. So they're not looking at the specifics of the case. It's a fact that you can mount a case, and as Carolyn said, you've got to have big dollars in this case to do that, which is beyond the realms of 98% of people that fall into the magistrates or family court. But as an example that may deter women from coming forward, a lot of these domestic violence advocates are saying, yes, this is the result of this case.
We definitely saw a huge polarization for Team Johnny or Team Amber. We saw a lot of women on both sides of this as well. How do we explain that?
Human nature. It sort of reminded me a bit of the dinner conversations that were occurring around the Chamberlain case. And in fact, I was at a function on Sunday where the topic of conversation was, are you for Team Heard or are you for Team Depp? I stupidly thought they were asking, what do you think the legal outcome will be? Who do you think will be the successful litigant? Which is why I said Team Depp, but I didn't expand on that. And then I thought, oh my God, you're actually deciding, you're sitting in the place of the jury to decide who's telling truth. And John and I, and indeed Mario in his work, we know that it's the evidence trail. It's what's written. It's what you can prove. It's what you can test. It's what you can establish as factual. That's the basis of litigation ordinarily. Mind you, I'm fixated not by the Depp Heard case, but I've gone down the staircase rabbit hole, the Michael Peterson murder trial, and the subsequent filming by the French documentary crew. I'm finding that far more, I don't know, I mainly because the net outcome is a man's freedom. It's a woman's life, but it's also a man's freedom that was at the centre of that story. Whereas this is reputation and this is money and this is their future. And I'm wondering if they've played their last roles in that courtroom. And I wonder who is now going to play Johnny Depp and Amber Heard in the film, because that is the stuff of which Hollywood and big money, that's the sort of stuff that gets attracted by that sort of byline. But this is in fact people's lives, but you also have to wonder to what degree about the authenticity of those lives. You know, did we see the real? And there's that whole issue. Do we ever, even as we live our own lives, it's a form of truth. It's our perception, it's our mind. It's not necessarily truth in its purest form, if you know what I mean.
Look, I see the court always like, oh, sorry, Mike, please.
Go on, Murray.
Look, I always see the court, same as a boxing game. Two people come in, hypothetically speaking, right? One is going to win, one is going to lose. Doesn't matter what side you are, the case is going to be one way or another, is, as Carolyn says, one woman death is one man freedom. And regardless what we hear elaborating and talking about this one, The difficulties are, it's not on a lawyers only what you know, it's not what you know, what you can prove in a court of law, at least that what I saw. But in this case between Depp and Amber, as I said, like entertainment was being put more on the lawyers, where the Johnny Depp, I said, like again, he was using his theatrical skills and you know, doing the things he shouldn't do. Here in Australia, again, I think that's going to happen to us, regardless we want or we don't want. As soon as you have the bigger case, it's going to be as well be put on a big screens as in this case, Depp and Amber.
Well, one quick thing, Mario, is that
Yes, please.
usually there's both parties are losers, and this is the case here.
Yeah.
In 90% of court cases, that's it. And the skeptics will say, and I don't disagree, there's one party that has won here, and that's the lawyers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't want to say this
absolutely.
because I didn't want to hurt the feelings of you and Caroline, you know what I mean? But
Oh, no.
that was the truth. So like,
This is a fact. Yeah.
yes.
I can tell you now, John and I are the sort of lawyers that say to a client, look, it's like going to the races. There's the trainer, there's the jockey. We're the trainer, the barrister's the jockey. Don't you love that, John? And you're the mug punter. We get paid regardless. For you, it's the roll of the dice. I often say, you realize you're actually gambling with your children's education money. Or so if you give them a concrete example, and very dramatically in my office, when we actually lived in offices, I'd get a client in saying, your job is to get her blood on the carpet. People would use this phraseology. And I'm thinking, A, how did you ever come to me as a client? And then B, what I used to dramatically do was open a great big sliding glass door, and I'd yell out to my receptionist, book me first class tickets to Paris, courtesy of this client. And then I'd shut the door and they'd be shocked and they'd be horrified. And I've just said, you have just written a blank check to a family lawyer. Good thing you're seeing me, because I'm going to tell you that you need, and then if you work very carefully with these people, you can unpack where that anger comes from. Where does the hurt come from? And if it's just hurt feelings, then you can actually start to get them maybe to empathize with their former partner and where they're coming from. So usually within an hour, I can actually get them thinking about, well, how does the other person feel? How do they see it? Are they after your blood? Or do they want this to resolve as quickly and as amicably as possible? Where's the gain in settlement? Where's the loss in the fight? And not just financial. People think, oh, it's just money and mum and dad will pay for my legal fees. No, it's your life. It's your time. It's your emotions. You go down that rabbit hole, and it's the rabbit hole of revenge. And it's not pleasant.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right, Caroline. I agree with you.
Now,
Absolutely.
how do we overcome what seems to be a fairly common occurrence, that cognitive dissonance? He seems like a nice bloke. I just like him, and I don't like her. We still see O.J. Simpson had his supporters and ongoing fans, despite the evidence. We saw former prime ministers writing letters of recommendation for a convicted pedophile at one stage, saying that's not the man that I knew. We still have, but he was a great dad and a great footballer, but he belted his wife. Like, how much of this has played into this, do you think?
Well, how long's a piece of string, Michael?
Yeah.
and some politicians did wade into this case. I noted some Labor politicians in this case over the last few weeks prior to the election even. So it did move into that space. But look, all different types of outcomes. And but again, as Caroline said, you've got to tell these people, where does it end up? It is a sad thing. Probably Caroline and I come across other lawyers that don't have that point of view. And so they're fueling conflict, because primarily they're not telling them what the law would interpret the case, the likely outcome is. They're pandering to their expectations, not too dissimilar from what the media has done here in a clickbait type environment. So all parties involved in the Heard and Depp case have all been party to actually inflame it for their own benefit. Really, at the end of the day, that's that. And then in the background, people want to make something out of it, as you said, one side or the other.
Again, Amber Heard has come out now with a statement released immediately after the decision, saying that, you know, she speaks for all women, or she was speaking for all women. Is that the case? Should we just put this aside and go back to focusing on not only trying to prevent, but trying to understand and stop this scourge of intimate partner violence? And how do we go? How do we just go, you know what, let's just draw a line under this. This is different from anything else, and move back to the hard, laborious work of trying to make an indent into this problem?
Well, Michael, I'll start. Look, each case has its own facts and circumstances. So for one person to claim the voice of others robs the others of their own agency. I think it's vitally important that people in a situation whereby allegations are made of family violence be heard, be listened to, but also supported. Because in my experience, and John may have a different experience, but you often find somebody either doesn't identify as being a victim survivor of family violence because it's so in their faces, they've lived it, they know that they're escaping some form of horror or terror. And I believe, I'm not talking about Amber Heard at this stage, I'm talking about the clients that we see. And these people have to have their experience unpacked for them before they can even say, oh yes, that was abusive, or yes, that was unacceptable. It's almost like watching somebody who's been programmed, and they have to be deprogrammed. It's like watching, and I have worked with families who've exited religious cults, for example. You watch over a period of months. It doesn't take weeks or days. It's months, if not years, of watching the victim survivor come back to themselves. And it takes a lot of support. They have to be respected. They have to be heard. But you don't get the story beautifully wrapped and chronological and delivered to you. It's a process. And during that process, what we don't want to see is the perpetrator of family violence heaping yet more violence upon them. So you want to make sure that any orders made, any systems put in place, any protection for that victim survivor, and usually children, you want to make sure that they cannot be got at. And there are many ways in which perpetrators can remind victims of their existence. It doesn't have to be a blow. It doesn't have to be physical, for heaven's sakes. The ripples in the pond go on for a long time.
Yeah, that's, if you've in previous episodes we've talked about in this IVO space, and I'm a big advocate against what we call counter IVOs. So let's just take a very vanilla case, as Caroline said, where you do have a victim, usually a woman that's suffered at the hands of a perpetrator, without doubt. But then all of a sudden the perpetrator's armed with counter IVOs. We've touched on the subject matter. If the perpetrator had links to Victoria Police, then they get a bit of a free card with that as well. And what that does do is just heap more violence on the victim, and it just pushes them to breaking point. And we've seen that continuously. Now, the people in the domestic violence space, referring to the Heard Depp case here, use that as a prime example, that there you have someone with power on one aspect, whether they're guilty or not. But the fact is they're able to wield these cases against the individuals. Back at the micro level, I see it every week in the magistrates court, where people are throwing these intervention orders left, right and centre against each other without any like backup factual material, and it's taken verbatim. So that's the impact this case may have on people trying to uphold or raise domestic violence awareness and abuse by the judicial system by perpetrators against them within the courts.
Yeah. Oh, well, hopefully this rabbit hole is sealed off again, and may we not have to deal with other people's dirty laundry like this. It was like looking at one of those apartment buildings in Hong Kong before they banned the hanging of dirty washing down the outside. So thanks again for your time on the Informed again, team, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks.